The Arizona wind screamed through the saguaro cactus as Jerry Stoneheart dragged himself across the desert floor, his throat crushed and his voice reduced to a permanent whisper from the rope they'd used to hang him. Blood trickled from the raw abrasions around his neck, staining the collar of his once white shirt. At 57, the former territorial telegraph operator had transmitted thousands of messages across the frontier, prevented countless communication breakdowns through meticulous maintenance, and spent 23 years bringing reliable information to the isolated settlements of the Southwest. But he'd never expected to be lynched and left for dead by his own telegraph company supervisor, betrayed for the crime of refusing to suppress messages that would expose a conspiracy to steal Apache reservation land. The merciless sun beat down on his back as he inched forward, each movement sending waves of agony through his battered body. Vultures circled overhead, their patient shadows crossing his path like omens of his impending fate. Yet something within Jerry refused to surrender, perhaps the same stubborn dedication that had made him an exceptional telegraph operator for over 2 decades. "You're too honest for modern communications, Stoneheart," Supervisor Caldwell had sneered as his hired thugs fitted the noose around Jerry's neck. Caldwell stood there in his expensive suit, gold watch chain gleaming across his substantial belly, his face a mask of contemptuous authority. "This territory's got no use for operators who can't tell the difference between message content and message control." Caldwell wasn't just any company man. He had risen through the ranks with suspicious speed, accumulating wealth and influence far beyond what his position should have afforded. His connections extended to territorial officials, land speculators, and anyone who stood to profit from the systematic displacement of Apache people from their rightful lands. The control had been Caldwell's scheme to intercept and suppress telegraph messages between Apache leaders and federal authorities, preventing the tribe from reporting illegal encroachment on their reservation while land speculators carved up their territory. When Jerry discovered the conspiracy and refused to block the communications, Caldwell had decided that a tragic frontier hanging would solve his problem permanently. Jerry had first noticed the pattern 3 months earlier: messages from Apache leaders mysteriously lost in transmission, federal responses delayed until they were useless, and an increasing number of land claim disputes that always seemed to resolve in favor of the speculators. He'd kept meticulous records, noting each irregularity in a leather-bound journal he'd maintained throughout his career. "Should have stuck to tapping keys instead of tapping into my business," Caldwell had laughed as they strung Jerry up from a telegraph pole. His men joined in the laughter, the sound echoing across the desert like coyotes celebrating a kill. "Maybe the vultures will appreciate your dedication to accurate transmission." The rope had snapped just before Jerry lost consciousness, dropping him into a ravine where Caldwell's men assumed he'd died from the fall. They hadn't bothered to check, a mistake born of the arrogance that comes from believing you control not just messages, but life and death itself. Now Jerry crawled through the cola and barrel cactus, his crushed windpipe making every breath a struggle, his vision blurred from oxygen deprivation and the merciless desert sun. In the distance, he spotted telegraph wires leading to a small station, the first sign of civilization he'd encountered since dragging himself away from Caldwell's lynching tree. The telegraph office sat beside a natural water hole, surrounded by well-maintained equipment and carefully organized message logs that spoke of someone who understood both communication technology and frontier isolation. Jerry collapsed at the wooden steps, his blood staining the planks that bore the precise markings of professional craftsmanship. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 40s, her auburn hair streaked with silver and pulled back in a practical style, her green eyes holding the steady competence of someone who'd learned to manage both complex equipment and difficult people in the demanding world of frontier communications. She wore simple but well-made clothing and moved with the efficient precision of someone accustomed to handling any crisis the telegraph business could produce. "Sweet Jesus," she breathed, taking in Jerry's condition. Her eyes widened at the sight of the rope burns around his neck, the telltale mark of a lynching attempt. Jerry tried to speak, but could only produce a hoarse whisper. Telegraph supervisor, my own supervisor, tried to kill me. The woman, he'd later learn her name was Kate McAllister, helped him toward her office with surprising strength. Her hands were calloused from years of maintaining telegraph equipment, repairing lines damaged by weather and wildlife, and handling the tools necessary for frontier survival. Her telegraph station was immaculately organized and equipped with backup systems that demonstrated genuine understanding of communication reliability, a stark contrast to the neglected operations that passed for telegraph service in most frontier towns. The walls were lined with technical manuals, maps of telegraph routes, and handwritten notes on equipment maintenance. Your own supervisor did this to your throat? She asked, examining the rope burns with hands that moved with gentle expertise. She reached for a jar of salve, the contents smelling of herbs and beeswax, and began applying it to the angry red welts that circled his neck. Caught him, blocking Apache messages, Jerry whispered, each word a painful effort. Didn't appreciate my interference. Kate's expression darkened with recognition. She'd seen this kind of systematic communication suppression before, the calculated silencing of voices that threatened powerful interests. Bastards, she muttered. They'd cut off an entire people's voice to steal their land. For 5 months, Jerry drifted between consciousness and fever, while Kate tended his injuries with a mixture of frontier medicine and herbal remedies she'd learned from Apache women who'd taught her their traditional healing methods. The damage to his throat was severe. The hanging had crushed his larynx and damaged his vocal cords beyond full repair. She couldn't fully restore his voice. Too much damage had been done to his windpipe, but she managed to save his life and help him adapt to communicating in whispers and written messages. She brought him slate and chalk, then paper and pencil as he grew stronger, encouraging him to exercise his mind even as his body healed. The voice isn't just in the throat, she told him one evening, as they sat by the small stove in her office. It's in the words you choose, the thoughts you express. They can damage your larynx, but they can't silence your mind unless you let them. When Jerry finally sat up clear-headed, he found Kate conducting what appeared to be a complex communication operation, relaying messages between Apache leaders and federal authorities with the kind of systematic precision that had once been his specialty. Her station was more than just a telegraph office. It was a communication lifeline that served multiple communities, regardless of their political status. You know telegraph operations, he observed, watching her handle multiple message streams with professional efficiency. I know enough to keep the lines open for everyone, Kate replied, organizing her message logs with careful attention to detail. Out here, a blocked message can mean a lost life. Her story emerged slowly. Kate was the daughter of an Irish telegraph operator who taught her the technical aspects of communication equipment and message handling. She'd married an American telegraph engineer who'd been killed in a deliberately caused equipment explosion when he'd tried to expose systematic message suppression targeting Native American communications, leaving her to run the operation with nothing but her knowledge and her determination to serve all communities equally. Men think a woman can't understand complex communications, she explained, adjusting relay equipment with expert precision. They learn different, or they learn to send their messages somewhere else. Jerry told her about Caldwell's conspiracy, the suppressed Apache messages, the years of honest service repaid with attempted murder. Kate listened without judgment, occasionally nodding as if she'd suspected such systematic suppression existed. This supervisor Caldwell thinks Apache voices don't deserve to be heard? She asked, her tone deceptively casual, though Jerry could see the anger simmering beneath her composed exterior. He thinks I'm a fool for believing in communication integrity, too rigid to understand that telegraph service is about controlling information, not transmitting it. Maybe he's right about one thing, Kate said, her tone thoughtful. Maybe the old way of telegraph work is finished. Question is, what are you going to transmit to replace it? Their partnership began when a series of communication breakdowns threatened to isolate Apache communities from federal protection, leaving them vulnerable to land speculators who were systematically stealing their territory. Jerry's knowledge of telegraph law and federal communication requirements, combined with Kate's understanding of equipment maintenance and community relations, allowed them to establish reliable communication networks that protected Native American rights. "You still know your trade," Kate observed, as they watched Apache leaders successfully communicate with federal authorities for the first time in months. "No transmission protocols, no federal requirements, know how to read the truth when messages lie," Jerry whispered, his damaged voice carrying the authority of genuine expertise. "Out here, that's still worth something." Word spread through the Arizona Territory about the station at Devil's Canyon, where Kate McAllister and the Whispering Operator could solve problems that had stumped territorial communication authorities for years. They developed a reputation for reliability that extended from the Colorado River to the Rio Grande. Kate's technical expertise kept their equipment functioning even when company lines mysteriously failed, while Jerry's encyclopedic knowledge of communication law and federal regulations ensured that their operations remained technically legal. More importantly, they found in each other something they'd both thought lost: professional companionship, shared purpose, and the deep love that comes from protecting the voiceless together in a world that seemed determined to silence them. The confrontation with Supervisor Caldwell came 2 years later. He arrived with territorial officials and forged documents, claiming Jerry was mentally incompetent due to his injuries and needed to be placed under Caldwell's care as his former supervisor. The official papers described Jerry as delusional and dangerous, a man whose injuries had left him unable to distinguish between reality and paranoid fantasy. "There's the old whisperer," Caldwell announced, pointing at his former operator. "Living in sin with some Irish telegraph woman, probably can't even remember Morse code anymore." Jerry emerged from the telegraph office, no longer the broken man Caldwell had tried to lynch. Hard work and purpose had strengthened his body, while finding his true calling had restored his confidence. His voice was permanently damaged, but his mind was sharp, and his whispered words carried the authority of genuine expertise. "Caldwell," he whispered, his damaged voice somehow more menacing than a shout. "You're looking prosperous. The silencing business treating you well? Don't get smart with me, Stoneheart. I'm here on official territorial business." "Official?" Kate stepped out beside Jerry, a rifle cradled in her arms. "Funny thing about that, I sent some messages to friends in Phoenix and Washington. Seems the federal government's been investigating communication suppression." Caldwell's confidence wavered as he realized they'd been building a case against him for months. Kate's connections throughout the Telegraph network had provided access to message logs and witness testimony that painted a clear picture of systematic communication suppression targeting Native American communities. "This is a setup," Caldwell sputtered, his hand moving toward his gun. "No," came a new voice from the canyon rim. "This is justice." Chief Running Bear emerged from the rocks with a dozen Apache warriors, their traditional weapons gleaming in the desert sun. Behind them rode a federal marshal and territorial investigators who'd been tracking Caldwell's conspiracy for over a year. "You want to steal our land by stealing our voice?" Running Bear called out in perfect English. "Steal your own breath first." The confrontation ended without violence. Faced with overwhelming evidence from both Apache witnesses and federal investigators, Caldwell's empire of communication suppression collapsed completely. His conspiracy had reached far beyond the original Apache messages, involving systematic suppression of communications from multiple Native American tribes across 3 territories. He died in federal prison 2 years later, still claiming he'd only been trying to improve Arizona's communication efficiency. "Feel better?" Kate asked as they watched the federal party disappear over the canyon rim. "Feel connected," Jerry whispered, touching his damaged throat. "For the first time since they tried to silence me, I feel like I'm truly transmitting what matters." Their partnership deepened into something more profound than business or convenience. They established a communication service that served the entire territory, providing telegraph access and message relay to anyone who needed it, regardless of their race or ability to pay standard rates. "We make quite a team," Kate observed one evening as they sat by the waterhole, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in brilliant reds and purples. We make connections, Jerry whispered, taking her calloused hand in his scarred one. The kind that unite rather than divide, that amplify rather than silence. At 59, Jeremiah Stoneheart was no longer the broken-down operator who'd been lynched and left for dead by a corrupt supervisor. He was a guardian of communication rights, a protector of all voices, and living proof that expertise could transcend physical limitations. The desert that had nearly claimed his life had instead given him purpose, partnership, and the chance to use his knowledge for something greater than mere message transmission. And Catherine McAllister had found something she'd thought impossible. Not just love, but professional partnership with someone who saw her technical knowledge as genuine expertise, rather than feminine dabbling, who understood that the strongest communications are built on respect for all voices and the recognition that every message deserves to be heard. Together, they'd carved out their own piece of the American dream in the stark beauty of Arizona's high desert, proving that sometimes the people society discards become the ones who transmit the most important messages. Their station became a landmark on the frontier, Devil's Canyon Telegraph, where communication integrity and universal access went hand in hand. The stagecoaches still rolled past their canyon, carrying mail and dreams across the expanding West. But now they carried something else as well. The knowledge that there were still places where all voices mattered, where crushed windpipes couldn't crush an unbreakable commitment to communication, and where two people who'd been written off by the world proved that the most valuable transmissions are those that connect rather than control, that include rather than exclude, and that operate on the unwavering principle that in America, every voice deserves to be heard, every message deserves to be transmitted, and every person deserves the right to communicate their truth, regardless of their race, their status, or the powerful interests that would prefer to keep them silent. Their legacy continued long after they were gone, inspiring a new generation of communication specialists who understood that true expertise lies not just in technical proficiency, but in the courage to ensure that every voice is heard. Their legacy continued long after they were gone, inspiring a new generation of communication specialists who understood that true expertise lies not just in technical proficiency, but in the courage to ensure that every voice is heard. Their legacy continued long after they were gone, inspiring a new generation of communication specialists who understood that true expertise lies not just in technical proficiency, but in the courage to ensure that every voice is heard. Their legacy continued long after they were gone, inspiring a new generation of communication specialists who understood that true expertise lies not just in technical proficiency, but in the courage to ensure that every voice is heard. Their legacy continued long after they were gone, inspiring a new generation of communication specialists who understood that true expertise lies not just in technical proficiency, but in the courage to ensure that every voice is heard. Their legacy continued long after they were gone, inspiring a new generation of communication specialists who understood that true expertise lies not just in technical proficiency, but in the courage to ensure that every voice is heard.